Exactly 75 years ago, hundreds of migrants stepped off the passenger ship HMT Empire Windrush and into the pages of British history. They were the first of thousands of people from the Caribbean who journeyed to the United Kingdom from the late 40s to early 70s, answering a call to help to fill labour shortages and rebuild Britain's reeling economy. They came to be known as the Windrush generation and helped to drive the UK's post-war recovery forward. Despite their immense contributions, members of the Windrush generation were subjected to racism and discrimination. In 2018, it was revealed that many were wrongly detained, denied access to healthcare, and threatened with deportation, even though they had the legal right to live in the UK. Later that year, the British government apologised to the Windrush generation for their treatment. It also set up an inquiry and a compensation programme for those impacted. But some Windrushers say they've struggled to receive that compensation. And in 2023, the government decided it would not act on several recommendations that came from an independent review. Claudia Webbe is an independent MP here in the UK. She joins us live in the studio. And just your parents were part of that generation, weren't they, the Windrush generation?
Yes. Yes, indeed, my parents were part of that generation. They came from the island of Nevis in the Caribbean to Leicester, along with other members of their generation, helped to build the Britain that we know today. Great and huge sacrifices to do so. And of course, that generation is being reflected 75 years on and recognised today. But the reality is, as what has been indicated, what comes with that is a level of deep and systemic racism, brutalisation. It's also 75 years of all of that. And in a sense, rights violated.
When people arrived, they came from countries that were part of the Commonwealth, so they automatically had the right to live here, and so they should have had those rights. And then explain to us how it came about that they lost those rights, or that those rights got eroded. And did your family? Did they know about this happening, or were they part of it?
Well, the Windrush scandal that you spoke of is really focused on the children of those that came as part of the Windrush generation. They came on their parents' passports and expected to be regularised here in Britain, but that didn't happen. And what happened as part of the Windrush generation coming here is that you also had an immigration system that was also fighting back and wanting to keep Britain white. And essentially, the reason why the Windrush generation went from 1948 to 1971, because during that time, immigration policies became harsher and harsher until they ceased the right of people coming from the Caribbean. And whilst people were here, they faced racial injustice in employment. They came to help Britain, but they also were given the worst jobs, housing, and indeed were met with signs saying no blacks. So there was a kickback that was really trying to suppress and stop people from the Caribbean who'd given so much. The story of Caribbeans here in the UK didn't just start with the Windrush, of course. We're talking about a history that goes back to colonial times and a history that relates to why the Caribbeans were British subjects in the Caribbean because of the relationship that Britain had in terms of the history of colonialism and slavery.
As part of the marking this moment, we've had the King, for example, talking about the immeasurable difference that the Windrush generation made, crucially important to recognise that. So on a kind of a big level within the UK, that's being sort of recognised. Do you think that makes a difference at all to people who were affected by the scandal, or do you think that it feels, so they're still not getting the recognition they deserve?
I think that the people have gone through a great deal of pain and hurt, that the Windrush generation have come and given so much, only to see their children shackled and deported by the hostile environment. Britain created internal immigration controls that meant that in terms of housing, employment, benefits, children of the Windrush generation were denied benefits, were denied housing, they lost jobs, they lost their livelihoods, they suffered great and immense mental health and torture, and they were deported, and they spent, with many spending their lives in industrial prison complex. the Windrush generation aren't reflected. They're underrepresented in terms of positions of decision-making and influence. And those are the difficulties. And I think that you can't ignore those difficulties. And the idea of celebrating when there are still issues to do with the failure to compensate people 5 years on after the Windrush scandal was identified, 5 years on, people are still not being compensated. 1,600 people, the Home Office say, have been compensated. This is out of an estimated 15,000 that ought to be compensated. And people are dying before they get that compensation. And even beyond that, people who have given their lives to Britain, then choosing to retire to the Caribbean, are finding that their pensions have been frozen. So their pensions aren't being uprated when they go back and retire to the Caribbean. And all of these sorts of issues are issues of pain and hurt. And equally, we're hearing now news stories of horror when people who came as part of the Windrush generation suffered mental health deterioration. Their loved ones found that they'd gone to hospital and instead of coming home, they had been deported. These are the stories we're hearing now. And so we have a long way to go to rectify the issues that have emerged.
Claudia Webbe, thank you very much indeed for coming to talk to us about it. Thank you.